Welcome to Possibilities Beyond. This is a podcast where we explore different disabilities, where we look past limitations, expectations, and show that there is possibilities beyond life experiences. I'm your host, Renay. Today I have joining me my husband, Kemar, who will be sharing our experiences with you. But before I go any further, I want to put out a disclaimer. I want everyone to understand that this is our experience. Everybody's experience is different, and that everyone is at different stages in their experience, so might be different from yours. I want to put out there that this is a podcast for positivity. We want to create a safe space where our guests can feel safe and comfortable to share their experiences with us. Once again, this is my husband, Kemar. I want to thank you for agreeing to come on here with me. We're going to be talking about our own experience. A lot of people might know, but for those who don't know, we have a son, Cairo, who is 5 years old. By the time you see this episode, he'll probably be 6 years old. He was diagnosed with autism at 2 years and 5 months. A part of the reason why I wanted to do this podcast was just to bring forth awareness. Coming from a country where I've never heard about the term autism before, it was a bit challenging for us. You might be able to tell in my accent, but I'm from Jamaica. We're both from Jamaica. Autism was just never a word I heard until I came to America, and I didn't know, even though I heard the word, I personally didn't know much about it until after my son's diagnosis. After that diagnosis, it was like a whirlwind because you didn't really know where to turn. There wasn't much representation in the culture. There wasn't much people who looked like us that was really talking about it. It was just basically going through it and going with the wind and learning as you go. Kumar, when was it that you felt like you thought you started to think that there was something going on with Cairo?
Um, I would say right around the time you remember that time when my mom was here and he was explaining to her like at this age he's supposed to be hitting certain milestone and he's just not like communicating with you like when you call his name there was like no eye contact.
Do you remember around what age that was?
I want to say that was around close to 8 months, something like that,
Okay,
going on to 1 years old.
okay.
And my mom's like, nothing wrong with him, because that's like how it is in Jamaica. And automatically I was like siding with my mom, like, yeah, nothing wrong with the boy, he's fine.
Yeah.
And you're like, no, he's supposed to be like making eye contact, like, responding to his name, and he wasn't doing any of that stuff. And I was just like, not I was just like not believing like this is like
That there was a possibility that he would have special needs.
right.
And just to give you guys a bit of context with that, just some background. For me, it wasn't like I immediately thought that he might be on the spectrum or he might be delayed. At around, let's say, 9 months, for me, I thought that everything was great. I thought that he was doing just fine, developing just fine. And then his aunt, Twanda, came to the house, and she usually come, she visit quite often, and she usually come and she talked to him. And mind you, Kara was born during COVID. Well, he was born just before COVID, January of 2019. So, and another thing, he was my first child. He was my first child, Kimar's third. So there wasn't really much to compare because there wasn't even a child living in the house at that time. But Twanda was like, have you ever thought that Cairo might be autistic? And I'm like, autistic? No, what do you mean autistic? And she was like, have you ever noticed that when you call him, he doesn't respond to his name? And I'm like, he's fine. Nothing is wrong. And after she left, I went on Dr. Google and I started researching autism. And I could like check all the boxes, play with the lights, didn't respond to his name. Um, I, Before, when we introduced him to solid foods, he would eat. His favorite food was fried chicken. He liked just about any seafood. But by this time, he had stopped eating everything. So but to me, I was just like, oh, maybe he developed taste buds now and he doesn't particularly like that. So I wasn't thinking too much of it. But after she left, then I was like, okay. I remember I called her and I'm like, I think that is true. What you're saying is true. And I immediately reached out to his doctors. So even reaching out to the doctor, to be honest with you, you're not prepared. Like he's checking these boxes, but you still want to believe that okay, he's just delayed. There isn't anything. He doesn't have a disability. There isn't anything. And I'm not gonna use the word wrong because now I know better that there's nothing wrong with him. But back then, that was the term that we were using, that there was something wrong with him. Um, so now we're gonna fast forward to the doctor's office, and I remember talking to them and telling them that I think he's delayed, and they're like, no, boys are usually slower than girls. He is still young. He could just be delayed. And I'm like, no, I think that it's more than that, because he used to do this. He used to say mama, dada. He used to eat, and he no longer does those things. The term for that is called regression. So the doctor was just to ease my conscience, say, okay, we're going to refer him to early intervention. So leading up to that time, Kumar, like, how was that for you after you hear that, okay, they're going to refer him to early intervention?
I mean, that's when it all started to like, sink in, and because I was still in the denial phase, like this is not possible. Like, like all of my kids so far up until him is just, making progress, hitting their milestone. And then I started to think about my aunt in Jamaica. Her name is Pinks. We call her Pinks. And she's like dumb and deaf. And then I started to think like maybe it's something that what do you call, what's the term? What's the term? Inherit, where
Yeah, you
you
thought it was
inherit,
inherited. Yeah, genetic.
yeah, genetics.
And just to say, we're gonna use the term nonverbal rather than dumb, because you want to be, remember guys, that we are still learning, and you
Right,
don't want to offend anyone by using that term. So you refer to it as nonverbal,
right,
because dumb has like a certain stigma towards it that you don't want to necessarily
right,
use.
right. So yeah, like I said, I have an aunt that's nonverbal and, partially deaf, I would say. And it started to make sense to me now. Like I was thinking like, oh, maybe this is something that's inherited, it's in the DNA or something. And then I started to like feel, still in the middle on the fence about it, but I was still hopeful. Like, okay, maybe I would get like some answers as to like what is really going on. So that's when I started to feel a little bit at ease, knowing that, we're gonna possibly get some answers to what is causing all of this.
Um, so after the doctor's office, they referred him to early intervention, and where we're living, it's Kennedy Donovan, and they called me. We set up the appointment for the assessment. By now, we're in the middle of COVID, so everything is virtual. And I remember sitting in the living room, um, on the virtual visit, and they're just observing. There was like a nurse, there was like a behavioral specialist, there was a bunch of people, maybe like four people who were doing the assessment. And I remember, like, after the end of the assessment, the nurse said to me, have you ever heard of the term autism? And I like immediately started to cry. And they're like, we don't, they're like, we are not able to diagnose him, but you need to reach out to the pediatrician and ask for a referral to Boston Children, because that's where they were referring people to. So up until then, by that time, like, I'm becoming more prepared, thinking that okay, and we're bracing ourselves. And at that time, like, I'm gonna keep saying, at that time, we're preparing for the worst, because that's the worst that could happen. Um, I remember I cried, and the nurse called me back, and she said, she wanted to apologize, because maybe she shouldn't have just said that in the initial visit. She probably should have gone off the phone, then made another visit where we could discuss it maybe in person so that I would be able to accept it more. But I don't think it was even that. I feel like you just don't know, when you hear the term autism, you don't even know what it means. You don't know what it
Right.
looks like. It's not something that, as I said, we discuss in our culture. We use terms like he's retarded or he's handicapped or stuff like that, but you don't know autism. You don't know what it looks like. You just know that, to be honest, like I felt ashamed, not of my child, but I felt ashamed thinking about the things that he would probably have to go through, or thinking about the things that we as parents would have to go through. Because one thing that we go through too as parents is judgment. Like and autism is a thing where it's easy to, because there's no face to it, there isn't really a set look, but like how Down syndrome, you can think about, okay, this person look a certain way, so you immediately know what it looks like. But autism, you can just look at a child and be like, this child is, oh my goodness, they're rude, in get so much trouble. And then you look at the parents who might seem as though they're not doing anything about it, when all you have to do is to just wait it out, let them go through the meltdown, let them go through the tantrum, let them go through, because this is them self-regulating. But you're on the outside looking in and you're like, oh my goodness, that could never be my child, so those were the things that was in the back of my head, like, rather than even, and I'm rambling now, but that's a part of the reason why I really want to do this podcast, because had there been someone on here explaining like I am now and telling you that things are gonna be okay, I feel like maybe I would have felt better about it. Maybe I would have had something to compare to. But fast forward now to getting the referral to Boston Children. Let me tell you, that is like a long process. It's like a year long process, like maybe a year and a half long process. Mind you, Kara was just a year old when he got into early intervention, and they asked for the referral. I asked for it immediately. They sent it over to Boston. I keep calling, and I'm like, they're like, he's on a wait list, and the wait list is like a year long. And I kept on calling. I called. I probably called every day until my husband was gonna have a job opportunity where he would have had to go off. You remember that time when you applied for a certain job and you would have gone to training,
Right.
and I'm like, okay, we have to get it in now, and kept on calling, but during the time, like after early intervention and him getting into that, and they're telling us that there is a possibility that you have autism. How was that for you?
It just came like a shock to me, like, because I just wasn't hoping for like that answer. I was just hoping that, they would have ruled that out, and, that wouldn't be an option on the table. And I just felt like I wanted to break down and cry, because I felt so bad. Like, what did I do wrong? Like, for my child to like be going through this, and start questioning all type of stuff. And, you know, the moment things change for me in terms of like making peace with the result that we got was when I started to accept it, because I was still in denial, like this isn't real, this is not possible.
So you're referring to now, like after the whole diagnosis, after Boston Children.
Right.
Do you remember what the process was like?
Yeah, the process was like us going into that room, and they have him playing with a bunch of different toys, testing his motor skills, and series of questions, and just basically seeing what he can and can't do, and how he reacts to the toys, and reacts to his name, and following direction and stuff like that. And even then, like when they were going through the list of questions and giving direction and the reaction part with the toys and everything, I still felt it was super emotional, to say the least.
What was emotional about it?
Because like just like seeing everything like unfolding in front of my eyes, like that I was in denial about for so long, like,
Like just the fact that he wasn't able to do
the
any of
stuff
the
that they were like asking him to do, and knowing that he was supposed to be able to do these simple tasks, so to
at the
speak,
age
at
that he
the
was.
age that he was. And it was like he wasn't able he was able to do probably like maybe three of the things, you know. And I was very emotional that day, like thinking like this is the worst thing that could happen. Like this is not what I was hoping for.
And just to give some context, after you get that initial evaluation. It's like a 4 hour long evaluation, outside of your home. Mind you, that he has never really been outside of his home for that long, and this was a strange environment for him. So that in itself was emotional for him too. And as Kemar was saying, that he wasn't able to perform like most of those tasks, like, and it's like it's created and generated to age group wise, like the things that he's supposed to be doing. Like when you do the evaluation, there is a child psychiatrist, there's a neurologist, there's a pediatrician, there's a developmental specialist, and I think there's a physical therapist. So it's a group of people who are in the room. And then there's an audiologist, because he had to do an ear exam just to make sure that he's hearing. um, Mind you, that after that 4 hour long evaluation, you now have to go home. I remember like yesterday was June 22nd, 2022. Was it 20? Yeah, June 22nd, 2022, where he got the evaluation. Then they tell you you have to wait. You go up front, schedule an appointment. It would be Zoom. And we had the results read to us via Zoom on July 2024. Do you remember what that day was? Like, well, not July 2024, July 4th, we had the results read. So, mind you, like, all the things going through your head from June 22nd to July 4th. Do you remember what that day was like?
Yeah, it was just like the same day like when we went to go get the eval, but worse for me, because now it's setting in. Like this is what we've been waiting for, to get the answers that we was in search for and hope for. And of course it wasn't what we was expecting, not even close. And hearing that he's diagnosed with autism, that's when it started to get more real for me. I'm getting more familiar with that term, autism. And I got emotional. You was very emotional, but I had to be kind of strong for both of us and the family. But internally, I was like going through it, but I couldn't break down and cry, because I had to hold strong for all of us. And I was just sitting there like thinking to myself, like, is things gonna get better from here? Like, because the thing for me was that he was like talking and hitting his milestone, and then he start regressing. And then here we are, like trying to figure out like what is really going on, what's causing this. Like instead of him going forward, he's like going backward. So of course, any parents, anybody going through that is gonna be, super, super sad and emotional about it, because it's like it's not making any sense.
Yeah. I remember that day like it was yesterday. I remember like the doctor reading off the diagnosis, and it wasn't just one. It was it was autism spectrum disorder being his primary. Then you had AFID, which is avoidable food intake, and then you have global developmental delay, which means he's delayed in all areas. And then that wasn't the only part. It was because it was like a 20-page long evaluation, and they had this like a chart that they scored. They scored where he was developmental wise. And mind you, I knew he was delayed, but I was not prepared to hear how delayed they thought he was. Or how delayed, I'm not gonna say they thought he was, how delayed the test results showed that he was. He was 2 years and 5 months. And the when she was reading down the evaluation with me, and she was like, well, in motor skills, his developmental level was that of a 5 month old. Um, Spoken language developmental level was that of a 5 month old, and he kept on going down the list saying that like he was equivalent to that of a 5 month old at 2 years and 5 months. So he was like 2 years delayed. And I remember her asking if we had any questions, and I'm like, no. And it was it was relief and shock at the same time, because by that time I was prepared to hear he was autistic, but I wasn't prepared to hear about the global developmental delay. I was not prepared at all to hear that, okay, because I'm like, how could I miss it as a parent? Because for me, I think that he was delayed, but in a sense, like I didn't see it initially. I thought that he was fine. One thing too, Kyra was the best baby. He didn't cry. He didn't show much emotion, and for me, I thought that was a good thing. I was like, oh yes, I can do anything with Cairo here. I was working from home, and I could do my work without him crying or anybody even knew I had a baby. I remember that day I left the assessment, the evaluation, and the results, and I went to the room and I did a good crying, like I did a real good bawling, and then came back out like everything was okay. Um, it was recently that I told him that I went to the room to cry. Like he didn't even know, he didn't even know that I went to the room to cry, because while he was trying to be strong for me, I was trying to be strong for him. Like I didn't want to. I don't even know why I cried, to be honest. It was just overwhelming. It was also relief, because when you come from the Caribbean, you know that immediately they're gonna say it's your fault. You're not having him interact with any, like my mom told me that, my mother-in-law told me that, my sisters told me that, everybody told me that is because he doesn't have any kids to interact with. You're not bringing him out. You're not doing this. You're not doing that. Like, and it's ignorance in a sense. Like everybody felt like if he was around, they're like, send the boy come to Jamaica, come make him play with him because of them, because the same thing did happen to this person's son, and when they send him come play with in cousin, he start to talk, so that was a big part of it too. You're wondering, something in your head saying, is it really my fault, you know but
Right.
long story short, fast forward to after the diagnosis, you go through, it's almost like grief. So there's different stages that you go through. um, the beginning stage is denial, 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 like no. Do you remember what that process was like for you?
Um, Afterwards, I mean, for me, it was just like I just started to accept it and started to do a lot of research as to like stuff they play with. How can I interact with him and, teach him like different things on the level that he's at, and just, finding, joy in the little things that we do together. So for me, it just started to become like the new norm for me, because that essentially that's what it is. Like, this is the future. And, accepting it, I could tell anybody, like, that's the biggest thing you want to do, is just be able to accept it, and, everything start to become easier from there. Because the hardest thing is like sitting there living in denial, because it's like there's no truth. But the minute you start accepting it, you start to live your truth. Because I remember when I, like, even going to the park, like I used to like I used to be like, like you said, ashamed in a sense, but it was, I didn't really know any better. It's just my way of trying to protect him. because I didn't want, like, other parents or kids to make fun of him, so like when he started doing his little tantrums and his little mood swings and
Swimming.
stuff and start to stem, um I would like grab him and be like, "Come, Kyra, let's go." Like,
And start
so
apologizing to everyone.
start apologizing so, it don't look weird or, stuff like that. But, after that, man, it was just like, embracing it every day and just, praying to God and, being thankful because, again, there's a lot of people in this world that would want to have kids and they can't have kids. And, the fact that we was able to bring them in this world, like, healthy as possible. And now it's up to us because there's still, hope.
You said, I mean, I noticed you mentioned that you started praying. While you were going through that, at any point did you feel like you blame God or like your faith was wavering or
Yeah, like you said, that's part of the grieving process. And, when I was grieving, I definitely started to question my faith, no doubt about it. And, I started questioning God heavily, like it was just like, how is this possible? Why would, let my son have these issues and, be born with this? But then, as I start to pray and read more and, interact with, like positive influences and members of the church, I started leaning more on my faith and like I learned, not to really question God about certain things and, be thankful. So, the moment I start being grateful and thankful, because there's so many other things that could have happened, but like that one thing, I realize it's not the end, so I started, just believing and holding on to my faith, and that's what really helped me get through it.
so if you ever had to, describe Cairo to someone, what would that description be?
Uh, Fun, loving, the sweetest little boy you ever meet. You know, he Kyra is very smart. Um, love playing with his blocks, and all around just the greatest little boy you could ever meet and love.
So the show is called Possibilities Beyond. So we couldn't just talk about the backstory without really talking about all the possibilities, all the things that we thought wouldn't be possible, all the things that we thought that maybe Kara wouldn't do. So when you think about like one thing that you at one point you're like, you know what, maybe he's just never gonna do that, and you accepted it, and then it happened. What would that thing be for you?
It's not just one thing. There's just so many things.
Well, you can say as many things as you want.
But the one thing that was significant to me was feeding himself. We struggled with that for so long, and we thought that that would never happen. And through practicing and me teaching him like hold a spoon and to put it to his mouth, and seeing him doing it, it was just like, wow, God really do answer prayers. So for me, that was like the one thing.
For me, there's just a lot of things, and one thing too I want to say, if anybody's watching this, focus on the positive things, focus on the things that your child can do rather than the things that he's not doing, because it's so easy to focus on the negative. It's so easy to compare your child to other people's children, and then you miss out, like you really do miss out on the little things that he is able to do that others aren't able to do.
Right.
Like Cairo, speech was a big thing for me, and I focused so much heavily on speech, like him not talking. And like somebody would say, well, my child talked when he was 4, and then he got to 4 years old and he wasn't talking. He's still learning to talk. Like he doesn't have like full language yet. And if you notice, I'm using the term yet because he started to be able to sound words. It doesn't necessarily sound like how I would want it to sound, or it's not coming out how I would want it to come out, but at least he can say banana for banana, and he can say ma, he can say da. He's like saying those things now, which it makes it, it's you, I couldn't even imagine, I couldn't tell you like what that means to me to know that he's getting there. But there was a point where I'm like, you know what? Maybe spoken language is not going to be his thing. Maybe he was meant to sign, or maybe he has this AAC device. Maybe that was how God created him to be. And I was okay with that. And it's like, I kid you not, the minute I'm like okay and contented with that fact was when he really started to sound out his vowels, sound out letters. Like it's just amazing of how you, the things that you focus on is what usually manifests, and then you're depressed because he's not doing this. But Cairo can build blocks. Cairo can navigate a tablet better than I can. Cairo does very good music for his age. Cairo notices like small details that nobody else will even notice, like the tiniest thing on the floor. He'll notice it. So focus on the things that your child can do. And I cannot stress this enough. Spend time with your child. Spend time with your child. Don't just depend on the therapist. Don't depend on just school. Like spend time with them and teach them. Like really teach them. Because if you know about ABA, if you know about so ABA is applied behavioral analysis. It's a type of therapy that they use for autism. So if you know about that, like I will tell you, Cairo had ABS since he was 2 years old, and I was one of those parents. It's like they don't do nothing when they come here. All they do is sit down
And
and
play.
play. I don't really see what they're doing, but that they're doing it, and then you don't even know when you learn how to do a puzzle. You don't even know when you learn how to drive a car, like because those are like small things that you would have to teach him. um Carrie's not our only child, so I really want to ask him more like, how do you feel? Do you go through any guilt when it comes on to, parenting or other children? How do you explain to them what's going on with Cairo, and how do you make them feel included and not like neglected or not left behind? Because that's a lot of guilt that some parents go through too.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely feel guilty, spending more time with him than the other children. But, I try to explain to them, like, your brother, has special needs, and, I have to, spend more quality time with him because he needs more guidance and, for safety reasons, especially because, remember, you can't even take your eye off of him. He used to like go through the door and be like, "Where is Kyra?" And then you look, he's outside playing. So, stuff like that, I point out to them, like, this is why I have to spend more time with him and, just be watching him and be present. And they definitely coming around and understand. And, I definitely include everybody in it. And now, you know, even her youngest sister is like a big sister now. So it's like great to see everybody interacting with him and playing with him and even looking out for him. And even his cousins, it's the same way. So now it's like spreading awareness. And now that everybody is aware, they understand and they don't look at it and feel a type of way like, oh, daddy's spending more time with Kyra than he's spending with me. They understand why I'm doing what I'm doing. So I think that's important for parents out there going through what we're going through with other children, to explain the why behind the what, because that's very important for them to know.
um one thing too that I want to make mention of is, don't be afraid to, talk about your child's disability, because a disability like autism, as I said, is not one that you can see. You would have to be in the child's presence for a while, and even at that time, you can probably not notice or not identify that the child does have a disability. And if people don't know, what I find is people, it's difficult for any of us as human to comprehend what we can't understand. We have to learn to give each other grace because honestly, let me tell you this. And if you're Jamaican or from the Caribbean, you know, the minute you find somebody staring at you and your child, you start getting defensive. The minute somebody says something to you about your child, you start getting defensive. When sometimes it's not even coming from a place, they're not trying to be malicious, they just don't understand. And I personally have been through that. And the minute you're like, you know what, he's autistic, people start changing. Like, because people want to help. Well, most people want to help. Some people will judge, and some people would not know like what an appropriate response is. But at least it's our job, and this is a big reason as to why I'm doing that, because I feel like if I didn't talk about it, if I didn't educate, if I didn't try to go out in the community and advocate for Cairo, who is? You know, I want for other parents to watch this and start being proud about their children, start bringing them out. Because I'm going to be like a lot of people in the Caribbean, when they have kids with special needs, they don't bring them out because of the stigma, because of potentially being ashamed, because of what people are going to say. But what I found is the more I talk about it, the more I educate people around me, whether it's family members, friends, or just strangers, is the more people want to help, the more people want to know more, the more people really want to just, you know, pour out love. Like I've never we've been so lucky to have family around us all this time that support us, and I do identify and understand that it's not the same for a lot of people. I remember at one point, early stage, I was depressed, I was anxious, I was going through so many things. So for those out there that are going through any type of anxiety and depression, it gets better. Ask for help. You might not have a village, you might not have family, but ask for help. There are different groups out there, some of which I would probably link in the description, that you can reach out to for support. Just, be vocal, advocate for your child, ask for help, get the assessment, because that's another thing too. People don't want to get their child labeled, but if your child is going through something. It might not be autism, it could be ADHD, could be anxiety, could be so many, different things out there, but you don't want to accept it. That really doesn't help your child. If it's doing anything, it's causing harm. Yeah, when they're at home with you, it's okay, but when they go out to school, they'll be labeled as problem kids, or they'll be labeled as bullies, or they'll be labeled as so many different things, when you could have gotten the early intervention, or you could have gotten the therapy, or you could have gotten so much different things. And the wait list is way longer for a child after they've passed early intervention age, which is 5 years old, than it is for Cairo, who was diagnosed at 2 years old. Because I couldn't even tell you right now what the process was like getting him into school at 3, because he was already enrolled through early intervention. There's so much services, so much support out there. Well, for us in America. But if anyone wants to reach out to me, or if there's any way that I can help, if there's any way that, and mind you, I'm not a professional, I'm just a parent who advocates for her child. I've had experiences that I feel like people will learn from. But I just wanted to put that out there. Kemar, if you had to, tell a parent that is going through that their child has a special needs or a disability, or is going through something, what advice would you have for them?
My advice to anyone going through what we're going through is embrace what you're going through, and like she said, just seek support, and don't be afraid to open up and be honest about what is going on, because the more you're honest and open, the more resources will come your way. Because if you don't speak up about what you're going through, then nobody can help you, right? Because they don't know. And so, like she said, some of the times we may think that people are judging, but some of the time people are looking to understand and just want to hear. And there's so many resources out there. Um, we just gotta speak up and just be open about what we're going through. And, you know, exposure is everything. I remember we used to try to, stay home for the same reason because we don't want to expose them to the world and, going through like little guilt and shame and all of that. But the minute you start exposing them, the more you'll start to realize like this isn't so bad, and it becomes easier and easier. Because I tell you, like, Kyra never like going anywhere. Like, I remember like when we used to take him out the house. You remember we used to put him in the car and start driving. He starts screaming and crying, and we're like, "All right, just let's forget this. We're not going to dinner. It's not gonna work," and we'll just bring him back home. But then we never gave up. We just kept trying and trying, and then like he never like like new environment. So whenever we bring him in a new environment, he would like start throwing tantrum and stuff like that. But exposure is key. You gotta expose them to new environment, expose them to other people, and let them be able to do their own thing and socialize and interact and have fun. Don't watch what people are saying or pay attention to the ignorant people out there. Just keep loving your child and embracing the moment and embracing them, and never give up. Never give up. Always keep hope, be faithful, and continue, because there's a possibility that, he's going to surprise you. So while we're going through the evaluation and, then we getting the final result and everything, throughout the whole process, like, was there a time where you felt like, you couldn't come to me about how you were feeling, or did you feel like I was like unavailable emotionally?
I feel like yes, in a sense, because I think that during the whole process we were at different stages. That we were at different stages. There is and that's why in the beginning I said that everybody goes through things differently and everybody might be at different stages. Like by the time I was at the acceptance stage, you were still grieving. So, or you were in the denial stage. So it was very hard for me to come to you with certain things because you would probably be like, no, not gonna go so, like you would be like sometimes saying power is in the tongue, or don't speak those things over, like we were at different stages. So there was a time when I would just not say something to you because I honestly, I just didn't want to hear what you had to say about it, because to me it just didn't make sense, because this is the diagnosis, the doctors say it, why can't you just accept that and let us work on moving on? I feel like it became better when you started taking him to speech therapy, and you were now at the acceptance stage. Then it became easier to coordinate care, it became easier to see how we can best support him, and then it became easier for us to be able to take him out, and we were a team at that point. But in the beginning stage it was like, no, we weren't on different we weren't at the same going at the same pace in the beginning. How about you?
Yeah, I mean, I felt the same way. Like you said, we wasn't always on the same page. When you accepted it, I was still in denial, and it became easier to have conversations with you, and you know it was a lot more positive, because I remember like there would be some times like when we will even argue about certain things because we have different opinions, and it's very important to tread lightly and understand and use emotional intelligence when you're going through these things, because you don't want something that is supposed to be a team effort now turn into
Debate.
a debate,
Yeah.
So it's very important, like, to understand where each other are in the process, and you know give each other grace, and
Absolutely.
and come from a place of love all the time.
Hmm. So one other thing too, I remember, like, for those who have um, multiple children, or I remember being so stressed out one time about, explaining to Kaylee, who was our oldest, Cairo's eldest sister, his disability, and I was like planning a whole speech and trying to figure out how I'm gonna, have the conversation with her, and I'm like, Kaylee, have you ever wondered why your brother is not able to talk? And she was like, Kaylee was probably like 5 years old, and she's like, no. And I'm like, why? And she's like, because he's autistic. And I'm like, what do you mean? You know what autism means? And she's like, yes. Um, I have autistic. I have somebody who's autistic in my class. And I'm like, do you ever wish that your brother was different? And she's like, no, she loves him just the way he is. And I remember like bawling out my, like, if you don't know by now, like, I cry for everything. I don't know how I'm keeping it together today, but so have conversations with your children, because it's jealousy can come. But for I've been lucky where I've had two wonderful daughters who never jealous of Cairo. They want to help him more than anything. Like his youngest sister, who is now 3 years old, thinks that she's his mom. She's like, "Come on, Cairo, let me feed you, Cairo." And I just want to say, thank you to every single family member that shows up for him. Like his grandma Ivet, that's his mom. Like she will literally go to the ends of the earth for Cairo. My mom, if it's about Cairo, she'll be on the plane tomorrow to come and see Cairo and help me out with Cairo. His aunts, his uncles, cousins, everybody. Like even the youngest, like my nephews came to visit for summer, and I don't know why I think in my head, and it's probably because I have to do that a lot with adults, that I would have to explain to them how to be with him, but they're just so ready to play with him. They never make him feel left out. They're pulling him, they're bringing him, and mind you, Kyra never wants to play with anybody. He just wants to be by himself. But I've seen where them being around him, just to go to the point where they were staying in Jamaica, that if I sent him to Jamaica to play with his cousins, he'll probably improve. Not saying that that's not true, because they want, if they have positive influence and models, but that doesn't necessarily mean that he will speak. But you'll find that there's improvements where is more open to playing with his peers. Um, as I wrap up this episode, I really want, to thank you guys for spending the time to watch this video. I'm hoping that I would have inspired someone. If you have a story that you would want to share, reach out to us in the comments. All are welcome. We really, really, really appreciate you going out and being kind to parents with special needs, because we go through it too. It's not just our children. Being kind to everyone with special needs. As a matter of fact, if you're a good human being, you're supposed to be kind to just about everyone. Spread awareness, understanding that we shouldn't come from a place of judgment, and it really takes patience. I remember praying a whole year long, asking for God to really bless me with patience. And once you come from a place of grace, you come from a place of patience, you come from a place of kindness, it's just easier for everyone in the world. Knowing that parent, that the child is acting out, he's on the floor, he's throwing over everything, knowing that it's a possibility that this child have a special needs. They're not spoiled. They're not just, the parents are just not doing anything. Sometimes if they're going through a tantrum or they're stimming, that's just, you just have to let the process play out, because interrupting usually makes it worse. So once again, thank you so much for joining us. And if you, it doesn't matter which stages you are right now in your journey, just remember that there's possibilities beyond every circumstances, that in the end it will all work out. Thank you.
Please like, share, subscribe, and hit the notification bell. Thank you
Thank
for
you.
tuning in. God bless.